Welcome to part 2 of the coast-to-coast trip on my Pan America in 2024. Now, we stayed in the northern states this year, but we left off in Washington. Part 1 of the video, the first video here that for this series was we left off in Washington. And so this, you'll see some of the Beartooth Pass, the Sturgis, and then stopped at a friend's house in Wisconsin, and then back home to Pennsylvania here to meet up with my wife and finish the trip. So enjoy the video.
We had ridden through a lot of rain the day before, so this clearer skies, sunshine was very welcome sight. And the weather turned out beautiful as we headed into Idaho. And we were headed towards, a friend of mine had pointed me in the direction of his cousin and said she lives in Montana with her husband. And so that's where we ended up spending the next night. So driving back to their place, some dirt roads, but no big deal. Very nice property. And the view that they had from their property was just amazing. I mean, just riding back there was beautiful too, because very secluded. Not a lot of people around and no one really bothers you. But as we pulled up to the house and walked around the back, the views were just phenomenal. Like, wow, this is gorgeous. So I ended up setting my hammock up right at the base of the trees, and the next morning when I opened up, that was the view that I saw. From there we headed off to Wyoming, Jackson Hole area. And we just did some riding around there. We did see some wildlife. You see buffalo and elk and that type of stuff. But we found a campsite in Wyoming that was my favorite spot for this trip. It was up a dirt road. We were riding. It was about 25 minutes of. I didn't keep track of the miles, but about 25 minutes it took us from the time we got off the hard road onto dirt road until we got to the top to where we were staying. And Curtis Canyon Campground, that's where it was. So you pay, I think it was $20. It's on the honor system, but you pay and you get yourself a tent site or a campsite. You can, there were a few travel trailers and a couple of small RVs. You can't get anything real big up there, but some smaller stuff. But a number of vans and campsites. That's primarily what was there. That was the outhouse right there. That, and they had a fresh water spigot, but that was it. No showers or anything, so which wasn't a big deal. But this was our campsite for that night. Beautiful setting. One of the things I will say about this, though, it was 74 degrees that evening. And the next morning when we got up to leave, it was 38 degrees. So a little bit of a temper change difference there. But this was our setup that evening. But with the evening being so nice, we decided to walk up to the top and look out over the views. And it was absolutely spectacular. And as we got up there, we saw a couple of paragliders. Here's a pretty popular spot for that. So we got to chat with some of those guys. That was a lot of fun to watch. But the next day we headed for Beartooth Pass, Red Lodge area. We actually made a pretty big loop and ended up at Red Lodge, got lunch, and headed up Beartooth Pass. If you've never been on Beartooth Pass, I highly recommend it. It is, not only do you get some beautiful views, it is a lot of fun. That road's a lot of fun to ride. So it's the twists and turns, and some of them are sweeping curves that you can stay in the throttle pretty good, and then there's others that you need to pay attention and slow down quite a bit. But beautiful, just unbelievable views. Now you also need to pay attention to when you're trying to do this. I was told that this year they didn't open it until like the second week of June because of all the snow up top. And I had a friend of mine that went out in the third week of August of this year. Actually, it was the fourth week, the last week of August. And they wouldn't let motorcycles up to the top. They said it's not safe because they were having some snow up at the top last week of August. So, you know, you never know. You have to be careful. We happened to have a great day, great weather. Happened to be beautiful the day we did it. But you need to be careful. You know, look ahead, plan ahead a little bit if you plan on doing some of these mountain passes. And a friend of mine also he was out a couple of weeks after we were, and he was able to ride to the top, but it was cloudy and wasn't the most pleasant. He didn't have the best views, but he still got to ride it and enjoy it. And this is actually Route 212, US Route 212, and we rode it from Red Lodge, Montana area. So you can do it different ways. Just depends on what you want to do or where you're coming from. So as you get towards the top, I don't tend to stop, you know, every couple of minutes. I like to get to certain areas and then stop and take some pictures or whatever. But up top, some of the beautiful lakes and just the views just spectacular. I mean, you can see for miles, and just absolutely gorgeous. And then as we headed down the other side, it was interesting how you could see the road as it was winding down over the other side. It's pretty cool. And we also rode Chief Joseph Byway. We had some locals out there tell us, hey, you need to get on that highway too. So we did ride that. And we headed towards a little town called Ten Sleep in Wyoming, which that is a neat little town. We ended up getting staying in a campground there, and this was the setup. Again, very nice little. The weather was perfect for us that evening, but it's a very nice little town. And then the next day, we headed for Sturgis, and I met up with some friends there. Got something to eat at the Boar's Nest. And they had an Airbnb in Deadwood area, and I set up my hammock. And we went out and enjoyed the sights and the towns, some motorcycles. A lot of neat stuff to see, you know, especially if you're into motorcycles, man. They have all kinds. And the next day, I did take a demo ride from Harley's demo trailer, and I met up with my friend Joe. His YouTube channel is FunOnWheels, and we took a couple of bikes out. He took the Pan America CVO, and I took the Lowrider ST. And they were fun bikes, and it was a lot of fun to do that. Some other sights, I mean, as you're out in Sturgis, one of the things you want to do is just pick out certain spots where you want to ride to, or certain places you want to see, places you want to eat, or whatever. Mustang Sally's. This, again, the guys just pulled in with their motorcycles, and it wasn't technically a show. They just pulled in and were showing off their sound systems or their builds. It's just different places that we stopped at. There's so many areas out there to ride, and that's the thing about Sturgis. You don't have to go downtown Sturgis if you don't want to. Just go ride the area out there. We took the time to ride out to Hewlett, Wyoming, and this is a neat little town also, but while we were there, as we were leaving, my friend Lawrence, he gets on his bike, takes off. Everything was fine until we get a little bit out of town. We hadn't gone too far, and his bike shut off. And it wouldn't start again. We messed around with it for a little while, and after a bit, we're like, well, the heck with it. We can't get it figured out. It turned out to not be too big a deal. It was just something in the fuel line. But meanwhile, we weren't sure what to do. So one of the couples said, well, we'll go back and get the truck and trailer. We'll come out and get his bike and take it back, and tomorrow we can get it into the shop and see if somebody can figure it out. So that's what we ended up doing, but we had a couple of hours of downtime just waiting, so we decided to ride back into town. Well, I was the only one that had an extra seat on my bike, so Lawrence gets on the back, facing the opposite way. We rode into town. It was hilarious because, we got a lot of looks and some waves and some smiles. But you do what you got to do sometimes, and it wasn't that far. So we ended up getting it back into town, and we got something to eat. And sat there and got a couple of drinks while we waited for our friends to show up with the truck and the trailer.
Hey, Derek.
that thing. Right there to the right.
Oh, that's a cat feet on that thing.
Heck yeah. Oh, this one right here. There it is. You want to get off? Is that where you want to get off? Ah, there's a spot. There we go.
Good, I'm getting off this one.
All right. So on Saturday, I did decide to go down to downtown Sturgis. And for those of you who've been there, you know what it's like. It's just bikes, just rows and rows of bikes. And people, a lot of people. So it doesn't take me too long to be tired of being around so many people. So I didn't spend a lot of time there, but did hang out and walk around some of the vendors and enjoyed my time there. But by the time I left a couple hours later, I was ready to get out of there and get out and ride. It was also very warm. It was about 105 degrees on Saturday morning there, so that's very warm. A little too warm for my liking. I like the cooler temperatures. But it's a good time. Did get something to eat, and there's plenty. You can park the bike and just walk to all kinds of vendors or whatever you want to choose to do, all kinds of places to eat, and grab a couple of drinks or whatever you want to do. Later that day, I headed towards Full Throttle Saloon. That's another fun place. If you get out there, spend some time in Sturgis, head out there. They get a lot of different bands in there, some pretty decent bands. And again, a lot of food, different vendors, a lot of people, but there's a couple of different places you can watch bands. They have a couple different stages, so it's not like you have to just watch one band and stay there the entire time. Did meet up with some friends there, and we stayed. I was going to head out earlier, but I ended up staying till after 10 p.m. because they had a couple of pretty good bands, so I was enjoying my time there. This band, they played a lot of good stuff, a lot of 80s stuff, even mixed in some country with it. I also got to meet my Rhett Raton, who from the Wall of Death. He was out there. I've seen his show a couple of times. And then we spent some time just riding around different areas. Needles Highway. If you go over Sturgis, Needles Highway, you're going to have some traffic. You're going to have some, you're going to wait in some lines, wait to get through the tunnels and that type of stuff. But it wasn't that big a deal. We weren't in a hurry. Iron Mountain Road. But you can't be in a hurry when you're out there over Sturgis, especially if you're riding some of the most popular routes, because you're going to have a lot of other bikers doing the same thing. But, you get to meet more people, get to catch up with people, get to have a lot of good conversations with people. And that's what it's about. Devil's Tower is another popular place in that area. Got to visit that and check that out. We actually got something to eat there too from one of the vendors. And on Wednesday at around 4:30 a.m. I headed towards Wisconsin, and I stopped in Sioux Falls to see a friend of ours and headed towards Wisconsin. Now, Ammon is a good friend of mine that years ago when I had the construction company, he worked for me. And He's a great guy, and I hadn't seen him. Him and his family had moved to Wisconsin. I hadn't seen him in, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, something like that. So I had gotten in touch with him and said, hey, how about, I told him what I'm doing, and I asked him if I could stay at his house for a night, and he said, certainly, come around. And they've got a beautiful farm there in Wisconsin. It's back a dirt road, some dirt roads you have to get back to his property. And then, of course, their driveway is stone. But it is a beautiful area. He's got a real nice farm there. And we set up that evening. They have their farm borders the river. And we set up the tents down by the river, built a campfire. Beautiful evening. Beautiful weather, beautiful setting. So they're in the southwest corner of Wisconsin, close to Stitzer, Wisconsin.
Ammon. Man, this is great. Ain't anybody bothers you back in here, do they?
We're the only people back in here.
Yeah. Well, I saw you were the end. There's one out here, I guess, huh?
So his boys took the pony and they pulled a trailer with the tractor, and then they made a makeshift tent in the back of the trailer. I set up my tent on the ground, got a good night's rest. Next morning I headed towards home, towards Pennsylvania, and I was trying to beat the storm. There was a hurricane coming up through, and we were getting a lot of the rain in PA from that storm. But I did take the time to stop in Shipshewana, Indiana. I have a cousin that lives out there, so I stopped by, spent a little bit of time with him, had a cup of coffee, and took a little bit of a break. And from there, headed home. And I arrived home early Friday morning, and Sunday morning, we got on the bike, and my wife joined me. We headed for Maine. So I'll put the rest of the videos of this trip on part 3.